when we planned to do this out on the pavilion, we were thinking about, new variants and Omicron and whatnot, and not a possible heat wave, so I apologize. Did everyone get a copy of this handout that we're using tonight? Okay. Here.
Behind.
Let's send a few around.
No, I didn't.
Well, I know why you're here, you know why you're here. We've got clay soil, climate's changing, there's a lot of rain, and there's a lot of flooding. So the village board, we've heard from various residents over the years, various places, and we said, all right, it's time to take a whole village approach, invite everyone, study the entire village, so we can have a systematic approach to trying to deal with what we have and what's coming, because unfortunately, I fear it's only going to get worse in the coming years and decades, from what I understand about the climate change. So we're very grateful to be working with Ty & Bond, the engineering firm who also worked with Tivoli for the water tower construction, the water main, they're working on the wells, and also on the sewer plant. And we are joined tonight by Ryan Morrison, who's going to give a presentation, and we're really grateful you're here, and he's going to sort of tell you about the structure and answer your questions, and then we could just have a good old Tivoli community conversation about what we're dealing with. So thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you guys for coming out. I appreciate it. I think Joel summed up our presentation tonight pretty well in the couple of sentences he gave this evening. For the most part, what we're trying to do today is the village has engaged us to kind of provide a survey to the community to allow you guys to provide us some feedback so that we can understand what plagues the community. And you as the residents tend to have the best idea of what's going on in the community, right? You guys spend all your time here, you guys get to see it on a daily basis. I can walk around the village, but on a day like today, I don't know what happens with stormwater. And if I come out in a rainstorm, I may see what happened in one particular rainstorm, but not what happens over a year-long worth of rain. You may get sediment build up somewhere that we're not aware of, or more maintenance may be required in a certain area that we're not aware of. So we like to engage the community and get feedback from you guys so we know where to look and what we should be looking for. And sometimes you guys have great photos that you've saved as part of like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. You take a photo and that goes in your archive, but the village may not know that. And so this is a great opportunity for us to kind of get a data upload from the community and understand what's going on in the community. So the first part of our study here includes two pieces. You may have seen some folks from the village, from Ty & Bond that walked around for about a week and a half, and they did an inventory for the community. The purpose of the inventory was just to understand what's out there structure-wise. I'm positive we didn't get it all. We did the best we could to find what we could based on existing maps, and walking the streets, checking for catch basins. Part of the inventory included mapping the catch basins, understanding the depths to inverts, making comments about their current condition, what type of sediment was in it. So that's the first phase of that. Second phase is the survey we're talking about. A little bit of background on Tivoli. Some folks may be here long term, some folks may be new to the community, so we like to just go over a couple of facts. The majority of Tivoli was developed in the 40s. That includes the areas of Broadway, Montgomery, and North Road. There may be new development since the 40s, but the majority of the development occurred in that time frame. The area we're in today, which is the Tivoli Recreation Park, came in the 80s. And then the area behind us, which includes Tivoli Acres and Tivoli Gardens, was constructed from the 80s through the 90s. The important part about all those dates, houses may be constructed at different times. The important part behind all those dates is all of that development predated today's current stormwater regulations. Today's stormwater regulations for developments would include the requirement to control stormwater flow within the development itself. So they would need to mitigate peak flows. They would try to infiltrate, not in Tivoli. Some of you may have heard the soils aren't great in Tivoli, but they would try to hold it there and release it over a longer period of time. For instance, if we got a 3-inch rainstorm in 5 hours, which would be a tremendous rainstorm, they would hold it over 24 hours and release it slowly back into the watershed. And that eliminates erosion, helps to eliminate erosion, helps to mitigate any impacts downstream for some folks that may live lower in the watershed, and overall makes for a better community-wide stormwater management plan. But all those developments predated that. So we're working basically with communities that handled peak discharge. I've looked at some of the maps, it looks like they looked into stormwater for those developments, but they may not necessarily look at holding it in a place and trying to make sure it was managed for everybody downstream. Community issues, not that I'm sure we're not going to touch on all of them tonight, but some of the community issues we're expecting to hear about tonight. Surface water runoff causing flooding. Surface water runoff would be as water runs across the top of the ground and sometimes will become channelized, which means it's running in a concentrated linear fashion, or subsurface groundwater. Some of you may be struggling with sump pumps. You may get water in your basement and pumping out of the ground. Those are other things we'd like to know because it helps us put together a full picture of what's going on in the community. As indicated, we expect to hear quite a bit about poorly draining soils this evening. Kind of already touched on what tonight's discussion is about. At any point in this evening, if anybody has a question or wants to stop me about a word I've used, we're a small enough group by any means, somebody can raise their hand and we'll stop and talk about something. There's a pretty cool available database online that allows us to look at Tivoli's development over the years, which is where some of that information came from. And I realize some of that may be really hard for you to see, but everyone can go home and look at their computer at their own leisure. Through Dutchess County Parcel Access, you can follow to your site address and you can click on your property, which is an outline of your tax parcel, and you can, in the lower right hand corner, you can access historical aerials, and you can see how development's changed in your area through the decades. And there'll be a tab in the upper corner there. You can click on 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, all the way up to 2020. And so that information provides us a lot of information. It provides us obviously what came in for buildings and developments. It also helps us understand, is there anything going on with groundwater or with surface water for that matter. Surface water would be lakes, ponds, streams. One of the notes we made in this analysis in the 1940s picture is not a great indicator, but was the stream that runs through. Many of you call it the swale that's within Tivoli Acres, but this area through here, which was previously a farm before it came Tivoli Acres, you can see there was clearly a defined stream in that area, which now has a swale through a lot of people's yards. So that gives us a little bit of background about what's going on prior to the development that happened in that area. Other background information, as you may have heard Joel present tonight, and it's in the pamphlets that you guys have. Basically, these pamphlets are a summary of what we're presenting tonight. There's a little bit of more information in the pamphlet we'll go over in a little bit, but the soils in Tivoli are really poor. 91.4% of the soils within Tivoli are what they would call hydraulic soil group C or D, which basically means they're very poorly draining soils. Some of you may have heard of infiltration tests or perk tests. If we had done an infiltration test or perk test in a C or D soil, we would expect them to drain very slowly through that soil matrix. For reference, for anybody that's looking at this map, which again is public information through USGS, the yellow and red are the HSG C and D soils. You can see basically any part of the developed area within the village of Tivoli is a HSG C or D soil. So for those of you that may be a little hard to see, Broadway's right through here, Linden Acres would be up here, and then Tivoli Gardens is over here. So that being in a developed area makes it really tough to infiltrate groundwater or infiltrate surface water down into the ground to help mitigate some of those flash flooding events. The other information that's on this page is, this is a mapping, this graph here is a mapping of the high intensity storm events that we're receiving in New York. The data shows that we're currently, over the last, this is in 5-year spans, so I apologize, it's a little tough to understand, but so when you break it down in 5-year spans, higher intensity storms are occurring more frequently. And when you get these higher intensity storms, it's not like you may get 1 inch over 24 hours, and that would be a lower intensity storm. But if you got 1 inch in an hour, that's super high intensity, and our stormwater systems aren't set up to mitigate that in that fast of a fashion. 1 inch over a long day can trickle all day, and we can get rid of that. But 1 inch in an hour is really tough for our systems to keep up with, especially systems that were built in the 40s, 80s, and 90s. One of the main purposes of what we wanted to do tonight was kind of help folks get ready to take the survey. I think Joel will tell us later that we'd like to, there's a link in your pamphlet to sign up to do the survey. It shouldn't take more than 10 minutes to do. But what we wanted to do is provide the residents a little bit more information about what we'd be looking for from the survey and kind of what's important to understand before filling out the survey so we get the highest quality information. And one of the things we find most often that we struggle with is helping residents understand what's private drainage related and what's most important for, or what's to be maintained by the municipality. So I like this slide as kind of a way to indicate or help identify for folks what would fall into public drainage ways and what would fall into private drainage ways. So this particular graphic shows the residents' property with two houses here. There's a right-of-way that's in yellow. The right-of-way would include things like your road, your sidewalks, typically the utility poles, and that would be the municipal right-of-way. And then everything that's off the right-of-way and within public land tends to be private drainage related. In the survey, we'll ask you a couple of questions about where do you see stormwater coming from if you're receiving flooding on your property? Is it coming from, a municipal discharge? You'll often see catch basins along the edge of the road or swales along the edge of the road, and then a pipe that picks up that channelized stormwater. That channelized stormwater is then discharged usually towards streams or low-lying areas that would discharge down through the watershed. Where that pipe discharges would be part of the maintenance that the village would need to upkeep. But after it leaves that pipe and is within a channel, that becomes part of either our private landowners, or if there's an easement for where it's discharging, it could be maintained by the village. So we just kind of want to identify where some of these stormwater problems may be coming from. It's also very possible that you see stormwater from a resident, maybe unknowingly, right? A rooftop discharge where the gutter comes down and they just have it going along the back of their yard, maybe discharging onto someone else's property, and unknowingly maybe exasperating so someone nod their head about a groundwater issue and have to do a sump pump. So those are kind of things we want to help understand and understand where they're coming from. So when you're identifying in your survey where private stormwater is coming from or where public stormwater is coming from, we just want everyone to be really clear. I don't think the village of Tivoli, to my knowledge, doesn't have any detention ponds in it. Joel, do you know if they have any? Yeah, I
They
don't
have
think
no
so.
detention ponds.
So we'll skip that one.
Question?
Awesome. Sure, absolutely.
Under your definition there, the swale, creek, whatever it is between the homes and Tilly Acres, under your definition, it sounds like that's all private responsibility.
I don't know about that one. That one we're currently looking into. There's some language in the previous development in the parcel map that talks about an easement for some or all of that. And we're talking with the attorney about whether that is fully within an easement and whether we can fully maintain it. We certainly can do maintenance at like crossings of the road, but I don't have an answer for you for that at this moment.
We have maps, John, that show an easement that is the village's. So I think there's probably, a village responsibility through that area, which we think it's being analyzed. This stuff no one's looked at in a long time. We pulled it out as we started to think about all this. But it's basically where that stream once was.
Correct.
Right.
Basically, they rerouted a small section of it, and they definitely labeled it as a stormwater management area. The question is, how did it get filed? And there's a lot of legal portions to that I'm not, as the engineer, I don't handle. The attorney will handle that part.
And being that that was a creek at one point in time from what you're saying, and you got the Hudson River right here, was there any review of runoff into the river and whether or not that creek could be disturbed?
Given the time it was developed in the 80s, I have no idea as to what the review was.
Okay.
Many of the mitigating measures that you see today, where we would fill out like a full environmental assessment form, didn't exist back then. So
There was a couple questions, right?
oh, I'm sorry, guys. Go ahead.
So, in the development here, a lot of the driveways either have or should have a, culvert pipe under their driveways.
Yep.
By this map, to me, it's like this description, it sounds like that would be well, particularly where I am, the village is maintaining it because our yard is on a corner and everything comes down and through our yard and into the stream thing that was there, fills up. So because when we first moved in, I had asked about that because it was poorly, it was damaged, and a lot of them are. But I was told that it's the property owner's responsibility, but based on this and thinking it is the village.
I have to speak in a lot of general terms tonight because every property is different and it's something we would have to review. I will say typically driveway culverts tend to fall within the right of way and do tend to be maintained by villages. That doesn't mean that there's not driveway culverts out there that are outside the right of way and are maintained by others. A lot of it typically depends on where that property falls, where they decide to put the culvert, and it kind of has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis.
If I can interject, so all those driveway culverts around the development, obviously they should be as open and clean and free-flowing as possible. That's one engineering physical issue. Then there's who's legally responsible. That's the whole, there's going to be a lot of legal who's responsible stuff tonight and going forward. And so, we're also trying to hear from you all to get the issues that need clarification, both for the village board and for the residents, property owners, as we go forward. So that's a perfectly good one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for the survey, that's what I was saying. Ours is fixed now because we redid it, but I was just curious because we get all of the water in our front yard. Like I actually want to fill in this big ditch because I want the water to go under the ground instead of going up in our yard. So.
Okay.
There was another hand over here.
I was just, for clarification, an easement, we have a property that goes, the easement goes right through, we have property on both sides. And the
Okay.
easement runs right through. Is that, my understanding was that we own the easement, but the village has rights to it. Is that considered private or the public considering that?
It gets really hairy, and so I'm trying to be careful with my language here. You own the property.
Right.
When there's an easement, typically, and I'll say typically again, they tend to be maintenance agreements where the village has the ability to maintain
Right.
drainage in those areas. And I do believe there's a number of properties in that area that do. I just can't say it with 100%.
So in the survey, though, that would be private, because we own private. When we fill out the survey, is that?
Yeah, that's
would be
fine.
private,
Absolutely.
Even though you have rights, the village has access to it.
To maintain.
Yeah, I think as we all speak, that's a really good point. As we all speak about this, anything that's an easement, it's privately held, but the municipality or an entity like the Water Authority now has the easement for the cross-country sewer line that goes along the creek.
Yeah.
The municipality can come on to do work or maintain it, but it's still private.
Private.
Whereas in the survey, if we talk about it's coming from public land or the right of way, that would make people think of the road.
Okay.
So that would be a good
Thank you.
distinction.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, sir.
How wide is the road right away?
I'm not gonna say out. I want to say 33 feet, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
Sorry, 30?
33 feet is a common roadway width, or 50 right away width.
That's my question.
Yeah, I don't know in Tivoli Acres.
And what I'm gathering, and we will get answers for all these, but we're having a lot of legal questions, and I do know a little bit about right-of-ways in the village, and they're pretty much different on every street.
Yeah.
North Road.
Right. Well, I figured.
North Road.
So, one of the things that will happen is we're gonna have to take a map of the whole village and figure out what's the right-of-way on every street, and that does involve going back to some old-timey stuff. But, these are the issues we need to tease out. Yeah, so we can figure out who's responsible for what.
Certainly, if there's what would be helpful, sir, is if there's a problem that's being documented, and you're curious if it's in the right of way, by taking the survey and indicating where the problem is and saying, hey, we don't know if this is within the right of way or on private property, then that will alert us to pull up the filed map that's with the county, and we'll be able to help identify where that falls. Yes, sir. Sorry, there's two of you right in a row.
Joel, we've been down the house. We get the water that runs down the road, goes under the road, into the catch basin, under the property, and dumps out my backyard.
Yep.
And then there's a drain, that ditch years ago used to be open completely all the way down to the river.
Are you down by Montgomery by any chance?
Yes, I am.
Yep, okay.
And over the years, when whoever took the farm, looked after it, and they had the cows and stuff, and whatever they did back there, they turned it into a horse thing, they filled over the dirt, and they sealed up that ditch. And all I get is a swimming pool in the backyard all the time.
Fills up and banks and everything else.
So, for years, we've been complaining to the village about who's supposed to be maintaining that ditch and keeping it open and clean. And every time I do it, not you, Joe, but previous mayors and then previous water guy would always come up with some type of an excuse not to do it, whether it's too wet, too dry, too this, or whatever it was. They would never maintain that ditch. But I would get the fallout of all the water, then all the mosquitoes, and all the garbage that flows down underneath that road and dumped in my backyard. So,
And now the pipe sticks out of the
now the
ground.
pipe is coming up out of the ground like this. It's
Okay.
These are sort of the personal accounts of what's going on in your property. That's exactly what, there's gonna be a place on the survey where you can enter your story and send your pictures and whatnot.
I
Victor has
actually-
been waiting a few minutes.
a long time ago.
Yeah.
Your preliminary survey, as you've done it in the village, does it show the creek that runs along the Montgomery to the properties?
The creek to the east to the west.
Good question.
It was,
So I have the creek to the east, right here, coming through. This would be Montgomery Street here.
Yes, yes. No, it's along with the Montgomery Street.
Yep, right here.
No, it's a creek.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
talking
on there.
about the old creek that has been exposed, but right now it goes underground and floods the properties. My neighbors, towards the center, all water comes from their property, in the middle of our property, and creates a lake on my property. Because the neighbor behind me created a dam, and I have a swimming pool on my property. So on the old village maps, I saw a small creek that has been running along the Montgomery Street. Probably like roughly 100 feet from the street. So my question is, have you found that there was a creek and because of the development, people just cover it up with the land? But when it's stormed, the water comes and it's just like a fountain comes from the ground and fills my property like a swimming pool. Joel knows what I'm talking about. He
Right,
has,
so
hundreds of
just to be
pictures that I
clear,
sent him.
he's not referring to the,
No,
Tivoli-
not the official. creek.
right, I'm just translating. So
Thank you, thank you.
he's discussing, a historic water feature that may,
Okay.
have been covered up by development, so similar perhaps to what was over in the development, so.
Thank you for the.
Yeah, sure.
It's not uncommon, while it's not ideal for that to happen, it's not uncommon for development to reroute things and cause problems over time. And at first, it may not be an issue. And then one more thing, while it didn't cause the issue, was like the final straw of hay that caused it. So certainly let us know, obviously in your survey, when you fill out the property, let us, help us understand when you tell us where your property is, that'll be helpful for us. And we can look up some more historical mapping to help identify if there was a stream and if we need to help, if it's within the town's ability to help maintain or help lower that groundwater there, surface water there, I should say.
Yeah, it was kind of, flowing through the surface for
Yeah.
the years since we own the property from 2002. But since a neighbor, about 5 years ago, decided to build a dam at the edge of our property, so the water does not go to the village easement that is right on her property and my property next. You understand? So the water cannot get to the easement. The city had it because it was catching that old creek naturally for historically. And now, for 5 years in a row, 6 probably, I have a swimming pool, every single, even small rain. I can swim in there. It's just, so my question is, if there was a creek, and I saw it on the historical maps,
Okay.
Probably you know that better because you deal with the map, right? So would it be reasonable for the village to recognize that as a waterway and to help to move that to the easement that is just probably a couple hundred yards through the neighbor's property? And we will avoid the properties that before me to be in floods and my property as well. And the neighbor who would dump to still gets the water.
Yeah, I think
So,
it's
so
also.
it would serve like a dozens of homeowners.
Yeah. Like we are really concerned about how all of this water is affecting the whole village. I mean, it's really important. It's part of why we're doing this. And this is gonna go on for a while, months, right? Now, this point we're at right now is about, we wanted to make sure we hear, let me get this straight. We're at the tell us the problems, we're not at solutions yet. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And I don't want to overpromise anything because once we have the list of problems, and it's going to be great, long, big, deep, then we're going to have to give it the engineering analysis of what's physically possible with various water and the legal analysis of what's public, what's private, all that stuff. So it's just to say, we'll need to sort of be patient with this process, but also, there'll be a time for what are you doing about it? Because our goal here is after this process and after tonight and after the survey, and then the engineer is going to chew on all this information and come back and make recommendations to the village, to all of us. And we're going to have to see what could be done, right?
So the survey, we have to proactively access it through this link?
So I want to say one more thing about the survey, and then we'll let Ryan get into the inventory which has been done, which I don't think we've even gotten to tonight. Here's the thing about survey. I feel it's very important that, we've got the survey mostly ready, but I want to be able to work with him tomorrow based on other comments tonight. There might be one more tweak, so I'm going to send it out in the village email. I'd say Thursday afternoon, Friday morning, certainly in time for the weekend. So don't bother going there tonight, please, because we may improve it slightly based on your comments tonight. But certainly by this weekend, I'll have it out to everyone. Ryan?
Sure. Quickly, guys, the inventory, there's a lot of different information that can be obtained out of the inventory, and I don't want to talk to you guys about how many catch basins there are, how many linear feet, but more just kind of indicate the type of things we found. We did find that culverts tended to not have maintenance or were failing along driveways, so that was a pretty common theme for us. We also found that some catch basins tend to get too much sediment on top of them, and it may have to do with where they're situated, it may have to do with maintenance regimen. We're going to dive into that a little bit more. We also found some aging infrastructure, everything being developed at the time it's time for some of these things to come up for replacement. So out of that inventory, we're going to help identify a couple of improvements that the village can make to the system. Like I said earlier, that inventory that we did is not 100%. We're going to find things after we receive your feedback. We may find pictures of things that we didn't know existed in people's backyards, and it may help us make sense. Right? We walk the right of ways. We don't know where things go once they went onto private land. We didn't want to trespass or anything like that. So as we get more information, we're going to continually update the survey. The other thing for this survey is that with it, we'll be providing the village with an iPad, and their own DPW staff will be able to use that iPad to update this information regularly as they're maintaining the system or as they see issues. So this inventory will become a living, breathing document and will be part of the village's, will help increase the village's ability to help maintain the system. Do you think it'll be made public, Joel, the drainage system inventory, or is it something that will stay within the village?
Oh yeah, this will be a public thing,
Okay.
certainly. I mean, we're trying to figure this out all together. We all live here too, and we all have the same challenges here. So I was wondering if you might talk about what's a typical street drainage layout, like catch basin, pipe, yada yada, and then maybe what's particular to what you have found in our village, and
Fair,
You know.
yep. So most typically, we see a curb with a catch basin along the side of it. The curb would help channelize stormwater as it got to the edge. Usually roads are pitched, right, in a V pattern. And so as water lands on the road, it wants to go to the side. At the side, it's collected with a curb. It runs along the curb down to a catch basin. Once the stormwater falls down into a catch basin, it would go from via a pipe to either a drainage manhole or out to an outfall. Usually the drainage manholes would link catch basins together until it got to a stream and discharge. In the village of Tivoli, what we found is that more often than not, we're lacking the curbs or the collection system, which can impact some residents. We're seeing those asphalt swales that go to a single catch basin, and that catch basin kind of discharge out, or they may link 2 or 3 together. But it's not, we haven't centralized discharge points here. We have more of an abundance of discharges all over the village instead of trying to find one central space we can do it. Part of that has to do with the village's topography, right? There's a large flatter area up here, and then down the hill we have plenty of places to discharge because there's a lot of streams back there. It has to do with where water is typically laying and where development is.
But like that map, at some point soon, maybe some revisions and maybe some drafts that, you know, gets replaced over time as new things are discovered, but we want everyone to be able to see that. One thing I learned in the last couple of weeks is that those catch basins, like in front of Theo's house on Montgomery Street, I always thought they went that way. They don't. They go back to Broadway, down Broadway, and the outfall is at the bridge. So we have a quilt of patterns, different discharges out different places.
It may have, it probably has to do with the times of development, right? We may have had one discharge point and the development went so far, so they may have brought it back uphill to discharge it. It all depends on how the town or the village was developed, and over the years this village has been expanded on, so many more discharge points were created. Any other questions?
I have a question about the survey. What about people who are not filling it out, but their yard is an issue? And how will you know that that is part of the problem if somebody doesn't fill out in writing?
Well, we want to, if part of our approach here is to try and get everyone to give us the bad news, right? And especially the pictures are 1,000 words and the videos are 1,000,000 words. And that's what these guys are going to need. Now, how do we get everyone to do it? I don't know. Hopefully we're nice to our neighbors and we can say, hey, did you fill out that phone survey?
What you're actually saying, can I rat on my neighbor?
No, I just know. Skip, you need to fill it out, don't you? No, I'm not
You know, I
even
mean, like
talking
these,
about,
you
I
know-
just know areas that are trouble spots in the development.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I wonder if this person's gonna fill out the survey
Right.
because.
Well, we're going to do everything we can to push the survey. I hope you will help us, get your neighbors to do the survey. And there are places that we all know, I had to close Memorial Drive for the first time last year. So we know that's a spot. But, one of the things that the board, as we spoke about this a few months ago, we said, you know what, we need to do this village-wide because we know about certain areas. What if there's a spot we don't know about? Let's not get too far down the road before we know exactly where all the vulnerabilities are throughout the village. So we do need everyone to help us get full participation on the survey. Yeah.
Maybe we can volunteer to knock on doors.
Yes?
Is there a question on the survey about cisterns? And are a lot of people do have cisterns or did have? I wonder if they're indicated on any of the maps.
I think a lot of those cisterns probably are not on the inventory because they're on private property. Right?
That's probably all on private property.
Yeah.
However, it would be good to have a question on the survey.
Do you have a cistern?
Sure.
Yeah.
Or your neighbors.
Maybe, where is it located?
I think that's very good. We want to improve this survey tonight based on this kind of stuff because that means you've got some capacity perhaps, or a lot of them got filled in or filled in with motor oil.
And I'll tell you this, they're not all on private property. When we repaved Montgomery Street in 1908 or 9, it cost us a lot more because in the process we discovered a cistern that we didn't know was there. So,
And there were a lot because of the flood.
Right.
So yeah, there could be anything.
I think that's a great.
I just want to be clear on terminology because I hear people use the word cistern 2 different ways typically. When you say cistern, are you talking about for managing septic flows or sewer flows?
No.
So it's for stormwater management, okay.
Water
Yeah, they
collection
used to
basin.
have pumps.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
so when we design that cistern question, we might make the distinction between water
I
and
just want to make
sewer.
sure we're clear with everybody, yeah.
Yes?
So, I think, I don't know what you call them, I call them runoff drains. I have one in front of my house, there's several throughout the village. The one in front of my house, from the water running down, is eroding. The one side has hole 2 feet in diameter, 2 feet deep, and it's starting to undermine the road. I understand there's a term fix, but I am very concerned that somebody's gonna get hurt, break a leg or something.
Sure.
Can't we get a temporary fix in there? I've emailed you about this a few times and I haven't heard back from you.
Okay, I've been over there a bunch of times with my guys, they haven't gotten to it, and that's my fault, so, but
Okay.
I've shown it to them.
Just a temporary fix.
It's
at
5
least.
Madeline Court.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, so something like that, and the term you're looking for is catch basin.
Catch
It's like a concrete box, sometimes stone, it's got a grill on it, and water's supposed to go in there, but it also chips away the outside of the box. so-
Right, it's broken through on the one side, the catch basin
Yeah,
is
I'm-
full of rocks now.
Yeah,
It's a dangerous situation.
I'll get over there tomorrow with the guys.
Also, don't be hesitant in that survey to indicate, like, there's a long form section you can put at the top of it, like urgent issue, and then more long-term problem. Not, in this case, obviously, for anybody else who may have an urgent case out there, don't be afraid to put it in the long-term section. I saw one other hand up over here.
What is the time frame of the survey?
How long do we want to leave the survey open? I think a couple weeks.
Yeah, I would say 2 weeks at a minimum. I think if you leave it, it starts to fade after 2 weeks
So
pretty
maybe
quickly.
we'll keep the survey open till like August 1st. And that gives us time to nudge our neighbors and get as much information in as we can. There are a lot of people on vacation right now, I've learned. So then the next thing coming after this is, I'm sure it'll take a month for Ty and Bond to go through all the feedback we're gonna get through the survey, and then, write up the recommendations to us, tell us what's going on. But throughout the fall, we're gonna be coming back to the community and saying, okay, here's the findings of the survey. We'll answer some of these questions like public, private, history of that easement, etc. And we're just gonna keep trying to, follow these problems and go towards solutions.
If there are neighbors that may have an inability to do online stuff, is there some way that we can do outreach to people? I mean, it just may not be.
I mean, the best thing, we want to get everything digitally at some point so that they
Right.
can go through it. So
Maybe.
someone could write a letter, right?
Absolutely.
Someone could write it out or type it out on the new typewriter, and we'll make sure they get it so it can be included. I mean, ideally, and then they could just scan that or something.
So there would be a paper version of this.
No, but I will say if you are,
Some of my neighbors might not.
sure, so we will, we want to make sure that they can write it out or send physical pictures. I guess we do need to,
On a limited basis, I certainly couldn't do it for the whole village, but on a couple of these, I had a couple of folks in communities who were not so computer savvy, and they called me and I walked through it with them. So they talked to me about the survey, so we could do something like that as long as it was on a limited basis.
I just think about like the census, when
Yeah.
everybody submits by mail and then those that don't get a visit from somebody to take them on. And I don't know if there's some way to do that.
I think we've said it for the last, they're gonna have to write it, they're gonna have to call it, they're gonna have to hand physical photographs, something like that. We don't have the ability to,
I would knock on neighbors' doors if they haven't been
right,
able to.
so I heard that from
And I
Mindy
need to
also,
know who
so,
those neighbors are.
if you wanna go up and down your street, I mean, this water goes from one person's house to the next person's house to the next person's house. It's something we all share, it makes us a community. So like, go knock on your neighbors' doors, you could really help us, yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Theo, you have something? Jim?
There are a number of homes on Montgomery where backyards go down and meet the backyards of homes on Fur Road. That would seem to be all private property. So the question is about easements. Can an easement, tell me if I'm wrong, is when a private property owner allows a public entity to do something on their property. So could a new easement be created, or can these problems only be solved by existing easements?
I can speak to that.
Sure.
You wanna
Go ahead.
Okay, so I've spoken with the attorney about this, and absolutely, new easements can be created, and we'll see where we get at the end of this whole thing. Again, be foolish to this fly. New easements can be created, and in fact, districts can be created. We researched the municipal law for villages and some of the things you can do. So for example, we are all in a sewer district, right? It's outside of your property taxes, and everyone pays into that district for the sewer. The water district's a little bigger, right? There could be, like I'll pick on Red Hook, this is hypothetical. You've got College Park, you've got Forest Park, they're both parts of the town. One place has a drainage problem, the municipality can make a district. Everyone in that district pays to be in the district, and then the municipality puts in some sort of benefit, more infrastructure, etc. That cost doesn't get spread through the whole community because not everyone benefits. So it's a long way to say that you can add easements, and you have to get every property owner to say yes, sure. And you can also create districts.
And you have to pay for, the people in that area have to pay for the easement or the district? Or
Well, if an easement, I mean, I'm sure there's some minor legal costs, probably more for the village than for the property owners. If a district's created, you're creating a district because you're about to put in infrastructure that wasn't there previously. And if that infrastructure is just benefiting a certain area, and this is just what's legally possible. This is nothing about what we know we're going to do or not do yet. So as an example, you know, the town might say Forest Park. You know, why would people in College Park be paying for Forest Park's new pipes and catch basins, right? It's just that area. Now these people get the benefit, and hopefully it ameliorates their problem, but they would have to pay for that. So that's just a legal tool that municipalities have. Jim?
Just a side note, if and when we do create systems to get channel water down toward the river, just to note that like the inn on 8 Friendship Street, already, if we're sending water downhill, they get a cascade of like Grand Canyon, like rapids through their property. So that's just something to keep in mind, that there are people downhill.
That's more my department than the legal department. So we'll certainly be looking at how we affect people downstream of any of the improvements that we make. So yeah, as we make improvements, we may need to mitigate peak flows if we're finding we're releasing more stormwater. Some of those photos a gentleman dropped off from Montgomery where water was just overtopping to begin with, that area was already seeing those peak flows. I mean, we're not increasing peak flows, so we can make that improvement, keep a road open, you know, at all times, and not worry that we're hurting that inn any more than we were previously. So we'll take a look at that certainly before we make any improvement recommendations.
Far on the far side.
So this is going to encompass like all the way down Broadway to the river?
the survey does.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
So it's going to encompass problems all the way down Broadway to the river?
Our effort, this survey, this inventory, it's the entire village. Yep. Yep. Ryan, is there anything else you want to say as part of your presentation?
I think I had covered it all. The inventory. And the last thing that was on my list was I wanted to make sure we gave out a date for the survey.
Okay.
The rest of it.
And that map, which shows catch basins and pipes, and does it show direction?
It does have direction. It has arrows on it.
Okay.
From what we can find, again,
And we
try
may
dates.
be adding to this, but I would like to be able to include this on my email announcing the survey so people can actually study this at home. And
Sure.
I know none of us can read the key from where we're
I'm sorry, that's why I didn't talk about it that much.
Yeah.
It didn't, not that this
But you can get me that file so I can
Absolutely.
include it, yeah.
So can you leave it up so we could walk up and look at it?
Yeah, we can leave this up for a few minutes. Sure. John, and then.
When you did your survey, did you take any note or inventory of where people have taken matters into their own hand? With drainage pipes coming off of their properties, cisterns,
We certainly noted if there was a discharge coming from a property into a catch basin in the right of way. Typically, we'll see a small 6-inch PVC or 4-inch PVC pipe coming from a property. We certainly noted that and tried to indicate that on our plans. We may have taken a photo of it in the inventory. But we didn't go looking for where people have gone and taken. To be honest with you, in a community of this age, it's very possible for someone from the DPW, 20 years ago to go and add a 6-inch pipe, and it wasn't the residents' fault, they didn't take it into their own hands. It's really tough for us to come through 20 years later and try and decipher between the resident took it into their own hands or the DPW did something, so that's kind of a tough.
There's no DPW putting anything into the subdivision with these pipes coming off of people's properties.
So I would say, John, that generally, to your question, no. This inventory is really what are the municipal assets, i.e. pipes, catch basins, swales, et cetera. So that is still outside of this, yeah.
I guess to follow up on that, Joel, when we provide this map or a version of this map, do we want folks to indicate on it or take a picture of where stuff's coming from their own property? How do we want to handle that?
I mean,
So this is supposed to be a
there's
municipal
going to be a way
map.
people can upload,
Yep.
like a JPEG or a PDF, right?
Yep.
So, you know, people could, I'm just asking you, you could say no. People could do a sketch of their property and say, hey, water comes in over here, goes out over there.
Yeah, we ask for that. So
Okay.
in the survey, there'll be an opportunity to just like sketch out your property. Where's my house in a square? What's my property line look like? And where discharges are. So you certainly will be able to upload something like that and help us.
Look like, if I can answer, what kind of limits are there gonna be on the number of files you can? 'Cause you can
I'll have to ask my
inundate you-
GIS department. I don't know at this point. We haven't hit it yet.
Inundate you with pictures. for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you hit the wall on
Over
that, you know,
years, not just-
someone could probably
That's
give a
right.
flash drive,
Yeah.
right? If sending it online, you know, overwhelms the survey capacity, but I'm sure we could get a flash drive if we've got a lot, get it in their hands. There's some hands over here. Yeah.
So, for me on Faro, I have a lot of basement water, and I'm assuming that a village wouldn't be able to mitigate that. So what would be super helpful to me is, I wanna know like who can help strategize how to deal. I have an old cistern, it might be filled in, I don't know, I see where it is.
Sure.
So, contractors or consultants who might help strategize how to repair some of that. Because there's gonna be water coming up from underneath that none of us can do anything about. So, you know, am I gonna always need a sump pump or so yeah, people that could help strategize.
Sure.
Engineers, whatever.
For most of them, I would say having an engineer come and take a look. Contractors are also very knowledgeable as far as, you know, on a residential basis of how to handle groundwater, whether a foundation drain would be helpful for you. Certainly walking the house with a contractor and getting an idea would be helpful. I don't know if the village is in a position to recommend anybody, but certainly we can, we do provide strategies in that pamphlet you're holding. One of the largest things you can do is help understand how you're managing stormwater on your own site, right? So I think on page 5 and 6 of that pamphlet we provided you, it's what's happening with your roof leaders, right? Are you discharging straight to the ground? Do we know where they go? Are we making sure they go to a place where they can evacuate the area and we're not adding to that groundwater issue? How can you manage them? And you can kind of do that assessment yourself. You know, you could actually, some people have gardens and they put a big barrel at the end of the roof leaders. They'll collect the water. That way there's less water going into the ground. So there's a number of different strategies, and every house is going to be different. But certainly walking the site with a contractor and or engineer would be helpful to understand each individual site.
Other questions or comments? So, Harry, were you just holding your
I'm
sage
assuming
brow,
you
or are you
have-
raising your hand?
You have no expectations that anything will happen in my neighborhood. Everybody's on 2 acres. There's a lot of surface water. There's a number of streams that exist there, and it all goes downhill and eventually goes in the creek. And as far as I know, everybody in the neighborhood is happy, including me.
We're checking Clayton.
Yes.
So look for a village email. I'm going to say Friday, so I can give us really enough time to approve the survey. Village email Friday. It's going to have the link to the survey. It's going to have this inventory map, and then we're going to keep that going until August 1st. And if you have any questions or problems or ideas, you know, you can please email me, mayor@tivoliny.org. So thanks again. Let's give a round for Ryan. The village board and I we know this is one of the big problems in our village. You know, we've water tower, sewer plant, you know, a few other things, nice downtown, but the flooding, the drainage, the water is gonna be another thing that can help this community thrive or wither or worse. So we're gonna dive in both feet, right? All right. Thank you all.
Thanks,
All right, move that up.